Hello and welcome to the BCM Game of the Month for January 2015. I'm International Master Andrew Martin, and my game this month is a gruelling but always interesting game from the London Chess Classic. It's the game between Michael Adams playing white and Fabiano Caruana playing black. Well, Adams opened with 1e4, and as they do so often these days, Fabiano played e5. The crowd were not exactly hoping for another Berlin defence and were relieved when black played a6. White played bishop a4, black played knight f6, and we go into the main line of the closed Ruy Lopez, where black suggests that a Marshall gambit should come on the board. Now, it's a bit of a pity that Michael declined the invitation to play against the Marshall, but he has played the Marshall so often with great success over the years that he must have tremendous respect for this fiery gambit. In case you don't know what the Marshall is, white quite often plays c3 in this position, aiming to build the Ruy Lopez centre with d4, and now black can sacrifice a pawn with d5. At present, the Marshall is looking like a pretty good bet for black. So Michael decides to just keep more tension in the game, preferring d3. Although objectively this should give black an easier time of it than c3. Alright, well, black played d6, white played c3, and we've got basically a mainline position from the closed Ruy Lopez here, where instead of opening the centre with d4, white's just playing more slowly. Black gets quite a bit of freedom as to how he wants to deploy his pieces. In this game, Caruana stakes some space on the queen side by going c5 and then moves that knight back to c6. After all, what was it doing on a5? So by playing this way, black is trying to control the square d4. White's plan, as I say, is pretty slow, so Mickey Adams continues manoeuvring in the closed Ruy Lopez style, bringing his knight to e3. Obviously there are other moves for white here. White could put his knight on g3. He could also play h3, again much in the style of the closed Ruy Lopez. And white plays h3 in these positions for two reasons. Number one, he's trying to deny black the use of the square g4. For instance, if we could imagine a bishop coming out to g4, then black continues to control d4, which is quite an important trump in his hand. And white could also try to make use of h3 a little later on to help a kingside attack. I mean, I would say in general in this position, white is manoeuvring to try and get an attack on the king side. So he could use h3 by later playing g4 and then maybe manoeuvring a knight up to f5. But Mickey decided to play knight e3 first, going back to the game. Fair enough. Black played rook e8. Again, a typical strengthening move. Strong pointing, or intending to strong point, the pawn at e5. Bishop f8 is coming next. Then white's going to find it quite difficult to time the move d4 correctly and to obtain an advantage. So white continues to try to probe the black position using other means. And again, a4 is a very common Ruy Lopez device. And apparently black thought now for about 20 minutes on this move before playing what looks like a very reasonable idea, just bringing the bishop out to e6. Just dropping back, what was he thinking about? I mean, it's hard to say. Maybe he was considering the move rook b8, just allowing white to get charge of the a file. Can white make use of this trump? Well, he can certainly try to. The a file is quite useful in many ways, and he might start with a move like bishop b3. We're going to see something like this in the game, where white is now adding to his small advantages. Just the control of d5 is a little bit awkward for black. So going back to the game itself, perhaps that explains the move bishop e6. Black's trying to give himself additional control of d5. But it's interesting, there's a moment coming up very soon where black can play d5 himself and doesn't take the opportunity. So Michael played h3. Again, slow manoeuvrings, just small improvements in position. And now bishop f8. As I say, opening up the rook on e8, just continuing to fall in with white's slow plan. But this was the first moment, I think, where black could consider breaking free with d5. This is the classical freeing break in the open game, and if black can get away with it, then it's usually a pretty good move because it frees up all his pieces. Now, I'm guessing that in this particular position, black didn't play that because he was playing for a win and he didn't want the position clarifying very quickly. For instance, after d5, it's easy to see that there's going to be a number of exchanges. I mean, I don't think white wants black pushing on with the move d4, gaining space. So he's probably got to take something. And the way he can do this, perhaps the most profitable way, is to take on b5 first, to take on a8, that drags the black queen away from the centre, and now to take on d5. And by playing this way and continuing to exchange, white is trying to prove that the black pawns are a little bit tender. Can he do this? Well, it's not so clear. Obviously the e5 pawn is a little bit poisoned at the moment because the g2 pawn lies beyond the knight on f3. But maybe bishop b3, and now black has two choices, both of which lead to well, quite a reasonable position for him. He can take on b3 and play queen b8. Maybe Fabiano didn't like this continuation because of the move queen d5. It's possible white may be a bit better here after queen d6, queen e4. Can black do better than this? Well, going back to bishop b3, he needn't take on b3, bringing the white queen into the game. Instead, he can prefer queen d8. And this looks quite reasonable for him. Again, there are a number of exchanges here. And then the black queen comes down and chomps on d3. It all seems to hang together. But of course, judging this is quite difficult. It requires a lot of calculation. And I don't think black can win this position. I mean, I think if anybody's better, it must be white. But this is probably about equal. So going back, black says, well, okay, I'm going to keep this complicated. I'm going to play for a win. So he goes bishop f8. And now white plays knight h2. Well, apparently both players were spending a lot of time, perhaps trying to extract the maximum from what is, after all, although all the pieces remain on the board, a rather equal position. Both sides have strengths and weaknesses. I don't think the black's in any particular danger. So black goes b4, trying to get some counterplay on the queen side. And now bishop b3. Black play rook b8, again resisting the temptation to play d5. I think there, once he's played b4, d5 becomes a little less attractive, but it's certainly possible. And we're going to see Fabiano playing that move quite quickly as Mickey comes with bishop c4. Black takes on c3, very consistent, opening up his rook on b8. And now here we go, pawn up to d5. And this is obviously the first really critical moment in the game as the play becomes pretty sharp. Now the main thing to note about this move is that actually black is sacrificing the pawn on a6. And so, to his credit, Adams takes up the challenge here and whips that pawn off, because probably at this stage he's also playing for a win himself. He can see the possibility of just playing bishop b5 quite soon to take away any tactical problems due to unprotected pieces, and so he decides to grab that hot pawn. And black plays queen a5. Perhaps that was the intention. It's a fork. Black's forking the pawn on c3 and the bishop. But quite interesting here was the move d4. And I think after that, black could have looked forward to the future with confidence, as this produces a position which is actually not that easy for white. For instance, if he takes on d4, black can interject bishop b3. That's one of the main benefits of d4. It's unleashed the light square bishop. Well, white's got to find a good square for the queen. And just to show how awkward it can become, if he plays queen d2 here, black just simply recaptures, and suddenly white's in a spot of bother, because black's bishops are becoming extremely active, and I think in this particular position, black can just whip off that rook on e1. And if white takes on c6, bishop c3. The tactics have resulted in a winning position for black. So going back to d4, perhaps better for white is to go maybe bishop b5 immediately. Well, then we get another interesting sequence as black takes on e3, white takes on c6, black takes on f2 check, white's got to recapture, and now bishop b3, again asking the question to white's queen, where are you going to put that queen? If he plays it to e2, black can maybe play rook e6, and after bishop b5, then go c4, again with the idea of unleashing that bishop on f8. Once the black bishops start to come into the game, this position is beginning to look a bit uncomfortable for white, as he may have to play king g3. If he plays bishop e3, we've got knight e4 check. So running that one more time, d4, which is looking very, very promising. What happens if knight f5, trying to keep things closed? Well, then I think black can take on c3. And after bishop b5, which is probably necessary, I think then black can just go bishop d7. And again, I feel that black has very good chances here. White can obviously try knight g4, which exchanges off a poorly posted piece. Black would change and then park his king in the corner. Bishop c4, bishop e6. I don't know, both sides have their strengths and weaknesses here, but I don't think black is worse because that pawn on c3 is quite difficult to capture. The pawn on d3 is a bit tender, and black's got use of the d4 square. So all in all, although queen a5 in the game is certainly a decent move, maybe d4 would have been better. All right, well, Mickey plays c4. Now, again, that's an interesting move in itself because you might expect him to play bishop b5. Well, then I think black had prepared rook takes b5. A tactical idea. White takes, black takes on a1, white takes on c6, queen takes c3, and black is in charge of this game because white's pawns are much more vulnerable than black's, and black's got two lovely bishops. So Mickey probably had to play c4, allowing black to take on a6. White takes on d5. Black recaptures. White takes again. And now a very good move. Knight to b4. A move which apparently at the time many people thought that Mickey had missed. And it's a pretty strong move to have to contend with because black is attacking both of white's d-pawns. So maybe Mickey Adams has not really achieved what he wanted to when he played this move, bishop takes a6. Black seems to be in very good shape, and now by taking on d5 and after knight eg4 playing f6, black is solidifying his position and should now be a clear pawn up. So, on with the game. Well, clearly white's got to work up some counterplay. And one way to do this is to try and get a kingside attack. So that move, knight f1, is pretty much on the right track. The knight is going to redeploy itself up to either h5 or f5 to try and cause some hassle around the black king. So that's why I think Fabiano centralises here, trying to get some counterplay himself against the d3 pawn before anything happens on the king side. I mean, actually, as a small tactical point, we may see a bit later that rook e d8 was better, but I'm pretty sure that rook b d8, that's the most natural move in the world, isn't it? You want to keep the rook on e8 for some sort of defence. Well, okay, up comes the knight. And now black plays c4. Again, perfectly understandable. Unleashing the bishop on f8, putting the question to d3. But it may have been better here just to show a little bit of respect for the coming white attack by parking his king in the corner. And you'll see exactly what I mean as in the game after c4. Now, Mickey comes in with knight takes h6 check. And perhaps that's the move that black had underestimated, because it certainly gives white some chances. Now the point of it is that when black takes, white's going queen check, king in the corner, and then taking back on c4. Sacrificing a piece, but at the same time getting rid of the weaknesses, causing black a little bit of anxiety regarding his king, because black doesn't really have many defenders around his king. And now you see the rook on a3 can swing across the third rank to get into the game. So whereas black before was looking forward to maybe gradually realising his extra pawn, now he's got to defend for his life. Well, black played knight to e7. I mean, clearly black could, if he wanted to, play knight f4. And of course that entails the sacrifice of another pawn, because white can take it, takes, and now take on f4 again. I think in general black wanted to play this as safe as possible, so he drops back to e7, covering the light squares around the king, and now queen to h5. Knight comes back to g8. White brings his knight in, and now black simply has to get his queen back to the defence. He's not going to be able to defend his king position without using his queen. So that's why black brings the queen all the way across to h7, packing the penalty box. But you can't help but feel here that actually white is really getting on top, because although the black pieces are sitting there defending, they're not really doing anything else. And apparently at this point black was also getting very short of time. Knight comes back to h4. Very logical. White's powering in with the threat of knight g6 check. But it may have been better here to just stick the rook up. This follows the principle of when attacking, attack with everything you've got. The d1 square is covered, so there's no untoward checks. And white's just threatening to bring his rook across to either g4 or h4. This may have given black serious defensive problems, if not insoluble problems. But knight h4, you know, the tension must have been high. You can't blame Mickey for playing this move. Black defends against the threat with knight e7, and now white brings his bishop to a3. And I'm sure this was the point of playing knight h4 in the first place, because it looks as though black's really all tied up. But knight bc6, excellent defence, saves the day, and defends against white's threats. So white plays his king to h2, which is kind of a difficult move to meet if you're in time trouble. You know, it's just taking away a lot of your tactics. It's reintroducing ideas of maybe swinging the rook on e1 into the game, and it's saying to Caruana, well, what are you actually doing in this position? Black plays bishop g7. Bishop takes e7. Another tense moment in the game. What was better? Well, maybe rook d1 was a better move, and that's the move set up by king h2, so that if black takes on d1, white can play the Zwischenzug, queen takes e8 check, winning. Maybe Mickey didn't do this because of queen to g8, but after that white has a tremendous move, bishop c1, an attacking retreat, and the point of which is that rook takes d1 is answered by bishop takes h6, and the roof caves in around black's king. So that was how close, I think, in this game Mickey was to immediate victory at this point. Instead, with the tension mounting, he takes on e7. Black recaptures, and white goes rook d1 now. Queen g8, but of course it's totally different in this position because white's got no move like bishop c1. So he's got to rely, again for counterplay, on not only the attack, but the presence of his queenside pawns. These pawns are pretty awkward for black because, you know, although they look isolated and weak, they are really quite awkward. Black's tied to defending his king with most of his pieces. How's he going to cope with some sort of advance on the queen side by the white pawns? So that explains rook b1. And White's thinking about moves like rook b7 now. So black challenges the file. White goes rook d1. Black plays rook e d8. And now here comes the charge, c5. Fabiano whips off the rook. And now comes rook to b4. Well, again, this was a very tense situation. I mean, you have to put yourself into the minds of these players. The time control has now been reached. And it's really a question of how black tries to unravel. Although he's got an extra piece, it actually doesn't look like it. It looks as though white's got extra material. And I'm not sure about rook b4 because it actually encourages white to play an extremely powerful move now, which was queen to d7. I think whatever black did on the last move, he shouldn't have allowed white to play queen d7. So maybe queen e8 was indicated, or queen c8 or something like this. Maybe queen c8. But rook b4, now comes a very powerful move by Adams. Queen to d7. Aiding the kingside attack, hitting the knight, and helping the queenside pawn advance. So rook takes h4. Queen takes e7. And now one of the first points of white's idea is that if black takes on a4 in this position, white has a splendid tactic. Rook takes g7. Getting to a winning queen and pawn ending after the simplest of sequences. Now white's just going to put the queen in behind the pawn and push it. So black in the game plays rook to d4. Again, centralising, trying to keep his rook as active as he can. Adams pushes forward with c6. I mean, he could have gone a5 in that position as well. And according to the machines, that might have been the best of all. The white rook may come across to b3 at some point. For instance, if black moves his queen. Something like this. Black's all tied up. That bishop on g7 is really useless. So going back to the game itself, rook to d4 was played. White played c6, black played queen f8. Queen comes to b7. Again, it's all about getting those queenside pawns going. There's a bit of a repetition here. And then Adams plays a splendid move here. Rook to c3. A lovely tactical idea which ensures the promotion of the pawn if black takes on b7. I think without that move, white would probably have to agree to the repetition. But rook c3, very good, and that's based on the idea rook takes b7, c takes b7, and now with rook c8 coming, if black moves his king, in comes the rook, and there will be no perpetuals here. For instance, after check, queen f4, check, well, just king g1, and black has no further moves. So after rook c3, again, black tries to play as resourcefully as possible and unfurls his bishop. Queen d7 was played. Rook comes to d4. And now white continues to play confusing moves. Queen to e6. Now c7 is a threat. So black has to play rook d6. And now we see another cute point to Mickey's play. He takes off the rook. Really excellent play, and again it depends on a tactical nuance here because e4 is check, let's not forget that, and black even gets the chance to take the rook on c3. But now there's a counter tactic, a check, a fork, and white takes on c3. So somehow this game has come down now to a queen and pawn ending where black is in serious trouble. Obviously, if black just continues to try to defend it, white's going to push his a-pawn and find some way to queen. So black's got to create some counterplay around the white king to try and get perpetual check. So f4 is indicated. Mickey takes. Queen takes, and after queen g3, the problem for black is that his own king is exposed. And what that means is it's hard for black to land any perpetual checks because, for instance, in the game, black goes queen to d2. Eyeing f2, stopping the advance of the a-pawn, but with a few accurate checks by white, it's possible to get that pawn moving. Now, in this position, Black played king h7. Maybe king g7 was a better try. And let's see, queen c7 check, king f6, queen c5, king g6, king g2, queen a2, something like this. White's got to somehow make progress. I mean, the way he can do this clearly is to play a5, but maybe that was better than the game, because actually by placing his king on h7 and retreating to the back rank, he gives the possibility to White of playing a final tactical opportunity, queen takes e4. And now, of course, queen takes f2 check is answered by queen g2 counter check, and black has to swap off queens. Well, once that e4 pawn goes, I think we can safely say that black is lost. I mean, we can't really criticise the players. You know, this must have been an unbelievably gruelling game. They're now down to 30 seconds of move. But really now, it should be fairly simple for Mickey, as he can cover his king and gradually get to advance his pawn. So the rest of this game is not too surprising. White just finds the best way of checking the black king to an unfavourable square, getting his own pawn moving, and the white king's perfectly safe on h2. So queen f7 was answered by queen e4 check, and king g7 by a6. The same motif here. Queen takes f2 check is answered by queen g2 check. So black resigned. Now obviously that in the end is a fabulous victory from Michael Adams over the world number 2, Caruana. And it was a great game of chess. I mean, the two players really put everything into that game, every ounce of energy to try and win. I think both of them were winning. Both of them were trying to win for most of the game. And so it's a worthy game of the month to start the year.